Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. My guest today is Mo Hashem. Mo has worked with over 2,000 investors, managed more than 4,000 tenants, it's probably more by now, and guided Flat Fee Landlord to become one of the fastest growing residential property management companies in the country. So buckle up for Mo. This is episode 225 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Mo Hashem. Mo is the visionary of Flat Fee Landlord. He helps working professionals go from owning one primary residence into profitable real estate investments. He's worked across the real estate industry in investing, property management, managing and buying multifamily, selling homes, and training real estate professionals. Mo, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me, Jonathan. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, I love talking to people who have a long history, but you actually didn't get started until you got a little bit older. What led to you getting into real estate, and when do you remember kind of first thinking it was going to be something that would play a role in your life?
Yeah, appreciate that question. I think I first got the itch for real estate in college. I remember sitting in my then girlfriend, now wife's condo at one point, and we were just sitting there. It was evening. It was, I think, the first of the month. And I remember she used to live in this old raggedy house, right? And it was broken up into 3 floors. I went to West Virginia University. So this is party school. It's been through some parties, all right? So she's living in one of these floors with a roommate. And I remember this guy just going door to door, knocking on the door, and he came to her door and he's just there like, hi, she's hi. She knows exactly what he's there for. She goes and grabs a check that she wrote out, hands it to him, and they're like, all right, thank you, and leaves, right? And I remember just sitting there, because I wasn't renting at the time. I was staying with my uncle. Yeah. And I was just like, man, what the heck just happened there? Like, that was...
Right, it sounds like a drug deal.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on? Obviously, the guy was there, at least to this point. I still like to think he was there to collect rent. Yeah. But I remember, I was one of these guys in school where I didn't have a declared major. I, at that point, had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life, let alone why I was even at school. But I remember I didn't know what that guy did at the time, like for a living. But I was like, whatever he's doing right there, that's what I want to do. I just want to go around and, collect checks from people, and that's it, right?
Well, I think you must have thought at the time that all landlord-tenant transactions were as smooth as your girlfriend just walking over and handing a check, right?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That taught me a different lesson, the importance of finding a great tenant. Yeah. Because, that plays a huge part of it way down the road. But yeah, for sure. So, I think that planted the seed for me in terms of real estate. You're right. I didn't really actually start investing myself in real estate until later on in life. After college, I did go out, get a job in business, corporate life. I got to learn a lot I got a job at a place where you learn a lot about management, sales, marketing, accounting, all your numbers, right? Almost like you're getting paid to get an MBA type thing. And I really enjoyed it. I had a great time doing it. But it wasn't until my dad ended up getting sick and ultimately passing where I was like, this is, I'm working for somebody else. At that point, the results of my branch that I was responsible for started going down just because, my mind was somewhere else. Of course. With my dad. And I remember at that same time, simultaneously, my boss's boss got promoted and somebody new came in. So they didn't know me from anything other than what they see right then and there, which is the numbers. Yeah. I remember the first conversation I had meeting this guy is like, hey, Mo, he comes and sits at my desk. He's like, hey, Mo, sorry to hear about your loss. Pauses for 5 seconds.
Let's get the numbers up. Of course.
Exactly. We need to see some improvement, or we're gonna have to make some changes. And like right there, I was like, dude, as long as I'm working for somebody else, this scenario is going to come up with something else and something else. And if I'm going to be spending this much time, I might as well do it building something of my own, right?
Yeah.
And so I ended up leaving. Again, no plan. But again, my wife came through and she's like, hey, like, you can quit, I get it, but you got to kind of have a little bit of a plan on how we're going to run the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And so I went back to real estate. You know, I remember that guy walking around collecting checks. I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll give a shot at trying to invest in real estate.
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody really across all these episodes has that crystallizing moment. I grew up with it, so I was really just around it all the time. But it's a very common thread for someone to just have one small moment. A lot of times it's with an employer not being like very okay with anything. You know, something, the death of a parent, another was somebody was sick, you know, and then it's like, I just can't work for somebody else forever. And that's a lot of the drive. But part of what you guys do now is help people keep their job and also use properties. So that must have started to be interesting as you got later to say like, hey, not everybody wants to jump out, but they all really want some extra income, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I always tell people, you know, I'm a business owner first, entrepreneur, real estate investor second, right? And I just happen to be doing a business related to real estate.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of people that I've come across when I network with them that are not like, they weren't born to do real estate, right? They had a bigger purpose in life, you know, saving people as doctors or lawyers and all these things. And that's what like wakes them up. It's not real estate. All that said, you should be able to do what you want in life. Right? Like you don't have to like turn into one of these like professional real estate people.
Yeah.
But you should also look at real estate as a vehicle to still help you get freedom. No matter what you do, at the end of the day, the goal is freedom, right, Jonathan? And so at the end of the day, whether it's real estate or something else, freedom is you being able to do what you love. And you don't have to be a full-time real estate professional to do that. But real estate can help you get there.
Yeah, great points. And I think, of course, you know, but I want to point out for the audience, when people talk about freedom, they always start with financial, but it's not really about that. It's about the time freedom, because some people, they don't understand that if they're going to be themselves a landlord, which is, of course, this is part of what you've learned over the time, they're going to sign up for another 3 jobs. You know, they're like, oh, it's cool, I'll just buy a 4-family. And then they don't realize what it takes to actually run a 4-family. And that's where property management comes in. And that who, not how principle of like, hey, I'd like that money, but also I don't want to talk to tenants all the time. I don't want to choose them. And I don't want to hear when the dryer is kind of on the fritz, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. So yeah.
But it must have been interesting for you as you got into real estate to kind of take that first moment where you saw, hey, here's the check, and then also get through the stuff where it's not going to be that easy. Like you said, that was the perfect tenant, but it doesn't always work like that. So how did you keep moving through when a lot of other people, you know, start off and then just get discouraged because the first thing isn't like perfect?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even with that, when I left and I wanted to get into real estate investing, very quickly, I realized I needed money to be able to invest in real estate. Right?
Yeah.
So when you don't have a job anymore and you don't have money coming in, you got to figure that part out, right? And I know today, you know, it's all these things about other people's money and hard money, all this stuff, right?
I was going to say, well, why don't you just sign up for like a wholesaling symposium? Because of course you'll become a millionaire right there.
That's right, right? But like, you know, this happened in 2010 is when my dad passed, okay? And so, you know, yes, it's old, but we still had the internet back then and I could still Google things. And so now it's much easier. You get on ChatGPT and you ask it what to do and it tells you step by step what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
But
so bossy.
But back then, you know, I had to do my own research and I was in Northern Virginia. That's where I was born and raised. And we didn't have a whole lot of like, so let me come back. I'm in Texas now. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Of course.
Texas now. And I'm surrounded by real estate investors here.
You're surrounded by the most giant supply of multifamily, too much, of course, which is what's happened. But yeah, you're in the thick of it for sure.
Yes, exactly. But in Northern Virginia, I wasn't. You know, that's government contractors.
Yeah.
That's people that they just live to work, right? And that's why they're so cranky, is because they're, stuck in traffic all day.
Got to get to all of those circles and get places quickly. But that's interesting too, because I don't think that your novice really understands that how different markets are. Even if you just talk about large scale multifamily, it still deals differently in each areas. Of course, Virginia, like it says, a lot of the population is working in DC and in that capital area. So there's a different kind of workflow than there is in Texas, which is just growth, growth, growth. And, people don't realize that Houston's like the size of a country. It's so gigantic. And San Antonio. I mean, it's just a huge state.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think with that, they always say like you're the average of the 5 people you hang out around most. And so like there were no real estate investors that I knew of, right? And so I just did my research, just reading what I saw on there. For some reason, I was on Bigger Pockets, I was on different things. And for some reason, I read a couple of times people say like, hey, if you want to get into real estate investing, get your real estate license.
Yeah.
And that's how you get started in real estate. And so that's what I did. Never with the intent to be a real estate agent or a broker, but just more so like, hey, let me do a couple of transactions. Let me take the commission from these deals and then let me put it into my own deal. That was the thought, right? But the economy at that point had different thoughts and ideas. And so, like I said, we're still coming out of the 08, 09 crash. This is still 2010, 2011. Yeah. People they're still underwater. So I'd go in there and give the perfect listing presentation. Jonathan, you'd be like, Mo, you're my realtor. I'm going to sell my house. And then I'm like, great, Jonathan. Well, here's the net sheet. This is what I'm going to sell it for. And this is what you owe on the house. And it's negative. And you're going to have to come to the table with money to close.
That was 2010 Texas for sure. Yeah. I mean, were you in Virginia then, or you were in Texas?
Virginia, so even
but everybody after 2008, it was a lot of short sales and potential foreclosure options there.
Yeah. And these were hardworking people. They didn't want to just walk away from their property. So after about like the 100th time of me hearing that, I was like, all right, well, what are you going to do? Like, you still have to move. Like, your job is transferring you.
Right.
Or, whatever it may be is caused. These are people that had to move out of necessity, not out of luxury. And so after, like I said, a while, eventually some person told me, well, I think I'll rent out the house for a while until the market picks up, and then I'll sell it when that happens.
Yeah.
So that was my time to pivot. Okay. This is also my opportunity to get some experience being a landlord, because that's ultimately what I thought at that time I wanted to do. And so I was like, well, why don't you let me manage your property for you for a little bit? And then when the market does pick up, that's how I'll sell it. Right.
Yeah.
And for me as a struggling realtor at that point, to me, it was just about putting food on the table. Let me manage like 10 properties, get some consistent monthly income from the management fees.
Yeah.
And then the paydays come in when I'm able to sell this house 2 or 3 years from now, right? But as soon as I started doing that, made a website, started talking, it blew up pretty quick, because that's what the market needed right then and there. They didn't need another realtor to sell their house. They needed somebody to help the accidental landlord. And so that's where that came into play. And as soon as I started managing some properties, I was like, dude, I'm not buying a single family rental. Because I saw what they were doing, and some of these things. This is early on for me too. I was kind of just learning a little bit as well. But, that's what delayed me from actually investing in real estate, because I saw some of the challenges with cash flow specifically that these people had. And I think ultimately that's the big misconception when it comes to single family, especially like this type of single family, where you're like, I'm just going to like make a living off the cash flow. And what, like maybe $100 a month if you're lucky?
Yeah, I know.
You're not living off that.
Yeah.
So that's why it took me a while to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do with investing, because at that point I hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, and now with so much experience in property management, isn't it just insane at how little vetting regular landlords do on choosing tenants? Especially new landlords. They're like, oh, you look nice, I'll take you, because it's the first person, you'll pay the price. Sounds great. But as we've learned over the years, you have to take so much more time in choosing the tenant. So even when you're choosing a property management company, that's so important as well, because you just don't want anyone, including your management team. You want to give somebody a good experience. And particularly the people that we're going to be talking about for what you do, they don't want to be bothered. They don't want to have the manager type of conversation all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, what I try to preach as well is, I wish there was more information out there when I was getting into it. But, there's so many tools out there right now that you could leverage. Okay. Yeah. And that's a key word I always like to talk about is leverage. whether it's through background checks or whatever. But still, at the end of the day, like, listen, you can give me the best lawnmower in the world. I don't want to cut my grass. I still want somebody else to cut the grass for me. And so I think that's ultimately what you need to ask yourself if you're thinking about renting it. Like, let's say you bought your starter home with your spouse and now you guys are ready to level up. We want people to not think of, all right, my only option now is I got to sell this home to get the next one. I would love for you to keep that home. That's your rental. That's your nest egg that you can build in over time, because now you get a great tenant in there. They're going to take care of that home for you, and they're just going to start paying your loan down, and you're going to let the market appreciate. And this is just a solid investment for you to keep. And now you're a real estate investor without even knowing it. And hopefully, like I said, I don't want you to become that landlord. You hire a competent property management company that can actually be that person, and you enjoy your life while in the meantime, your property is bringing you equity, just like a retirement plan would with a 401k or an IRA.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, in a tough market, you can just wait it out and get the windfall later. Even if you're break even, you're not losing any money. So really, what's the point? It's really if you're net negative or the property's in disrepair, you don't have the money to fix it, so it's not as rentable. Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Mo Hashem. And if you're already interested in Flat Fee Landlord, that's where you need to go. flatfeelandlord.com. You can find out what Mo and his team are doing in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Maryland, Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Houston, DFW, and Atlanta. Let's get back to Mo. One thing I wanted to ask you, with so much experience in the property management side, a lot of what I hear is, and what I know of property management is, it's very hard for somebody who just has their first property, that accidental landlord, to find like the best property manager, because for the big property management companies, a one-off for $900 isn't something that they're looking for. So how do you find those people to work together where, hey, they may want to build up, but also a lot of times they're just like cruising Facebook because nobody wants that account? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, listen, businesses are in business to solve people's problems, right? And so, I always look at somebody's rental property as their problem, right? And I like to ask myself, am I the best person to solve this person's problem? Because we have a very specific box that we stay within, our avatar of the type of property we want to bring in.
Smart.
And we don't really go out of that. And so I think the biggest thing is, if you're a landlord and you're looking for somebody that is going to be taking care of your property, you need to see what their current portfolio is and does it match up with what you have, right? So like, if you got a C-class, house in the rough town part of neighborhood out in like rural America, you're not going to work with us because that's not the types of properties we manage, right? Yeah. But there are management companies out there that do, and you just need to find that. So I think that's it. Like, just like you are interviewing somebody to work for you, you should be interviewing property managers as well, and really asking open-ended questions. One of the things I say is, don't lead the witness, right? Don't give the property manager.
I was a lawyer, yeah.
Yeah, don't know. Hey, do you manage this type of property here? Like, telling them exactly what you want to hear, and they just regurgitate it back to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense though, because I think if you look at what their portfolio looks like and you see someone and they're like, well, we manage this 237 unit over there and then a couple others, you're not important. If you talk to them and they're like, no, we have 42 separate solo owners, that seems like a great spot because they've already built a big enough hub where they like it locationally, it works. I think that's really smart advice, because that's the thing that I think is really hard. I think I wouldn't say easy to manage yourself. It's easy to manage yourself if you really want to help the tenants. But if, like me, you don't want any phone calls, you don't want to do it yourself. It's just not a smart idea. You'll eventually grow tired of it, which means you won't do the repairs or you won't talk to them, and then they'll treat the property worse because you're absent, right? I mean, that's just part of the whole process.
Yeah, I think that plays a big part in it. I think the other thing with it is, any minute you spend doing something is a minute you're not spending doing something else, right? And I think the bigger thing is, like, again, were you really hoping to sign up as a landlord? Like me, when I said I wanted to be a real estate investor, again, it wasn't to become a property manager. It was to become a true investor where I let my money work for me and not the other way around. Like I said, now I built a business around it. And so, I've been able to scale my team to be able to handle a lot of those tasks that I'm not very good at or even want to do. And I think that's really when it comes down to, unless you get to that level to where you can have scale to be able to do those things. If you have one or two properties, I really don't think you should be, and again, it's up to you what you want to do. But if your goal is not to be a landlord or a property manager and it's to be the best physician or the best this or that, then you should probably hand that off to somebody else. And at the same time, that doesn't mean you just like close your eyes and your ears. You still got to check in and see how things are going and keep an eye on your statements and all that stuff, like trust but verify. But once you found that person, it may take you one or two tries to do it, unfortunately, or if you're lucky, you may get it right on the first one. But that's where I'm at. I think I'm at the point in my life, I'm not the newbie investor anymore. And I'm not out here knocking on doors trying to get wholesale flips and all that kind of stuff. Like, I made my money. I would like my money to work for me. I know there's plenty of other people out there that are in that same situation.
Yeah, and thinking of it the way that a lot of investors start, as I always was cracking on wholesaling, I think somebody would get so much better education by working as a property manager first if they wanted to own rental properties. If you want to flip and do acquisition, you may learn more, starting as a wholesaler because you're dealing with that one-to-one acquisition. I mean, everything's a people game, but that's really specific to acquisition. Whereas if you want to be a good landlord later and you work for a year as a property manager, like you were already advanced with the property management skills that probably help you decide, well, now I'm ready to invest because I'm not scared of it anymore. I'm not going to let myself get the tenants that my clients got in the beginning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and make the same mistakes. Now, luckily, knock on wood, there was no mistake we made that our clients couldn't recover from, or we made them whole. That's what it comes down to. You're paying for education one way or the other. You're either paying for it through mistakes, or you're actually paying somebody for their mentorship or their actual teaching of it. So now I have a different philosophy. I'm not really into the whole trial and error thing anymore. If like somebody knows how to do it, I'd rather speed up that timeline and like just pay them to tell me how to do it, or actually better yet, have them just do it for me and I pay them for it. And I think it's just a different mindset now. And I think that can evolve. And, I think no matter what stage in life you're in, like we all change, and ultimately your mindset shifts and changes as well. What was a priority back then may not be as much of a priority now. And so, going back to, can it help you being a better landlord? For sure. I mean, I knew, when I got into investing in myself, eventually, I didn't even start investing other than my own primary residence. That wasn't my first investment. My first investment actually came in raising money with other people to buy syndication ultimately, right? And so I was like, this doesn't make sense if I just buy them one or two at a time. I need to buy 300 at a time or 400 at a time, which is ultimately what we did. And now you got scale built in, because here's the thing with real estate, like scale is important. It's very important. And so I recognize that.
Yeah, I think people just think of scale in the wrong way because like you were saying before with $100 a month, people start calculating, hey, let me get, 14 single families, and then they have 14 single families producing 100 a month. One furnace breaks and they don't make money on all of them for 6 years and they hate all the tenants. So a lot of people who start with single family get to that, well, I have 10 singles, why wouldn't I just get a 10 unit? At least I have one roof and everybody's in the same place. So my management gets to be easier. And that's part of, like you said, figuring out what works for you. I still don't think it's not worth it to get single families. I just think a lot of people figure out, hey, maybe that's their thing, maybe it's not. But from a management perspective, there's a lot of different ways to be more efficient. And that's a big part of property management.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, just to say, I say all that, what I just said, to say, I still think single family is a very solid investment.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I love it. It's in our plan to acquire more single family in the future as we go, because I believe in it so much, even more so than multifamily at this point. But, that's just how it is. At the end of the day, it's just, if you're getting started, what's the easiest way for you to get started?
Yeah.
It's not quitting your job. It's not doing all these things. Like getting one deal is not going to be enough for you to quit your job. So still stay at your job if you have one, or your business, but look at it as if, like, I say this all the time, like as if you're investing into your retirement plan, your 401k, your IRA. You're not pulling, even if you do cash flow or get dividends from that, you can't do anything with it right now anyways, right?
Yeah.
Just reinvest it. And that's that delayed gratification that comes out of it, right?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate and proponent of just reminding people that they need to stay at their job a couple more years than they think. Because really, if they're the best at their job, why wouldn't you just keep doing it? I like working. People are like, when are you going to retire? I'm like, I've been on time freedom for 20 years. I mean, it doesn't mean I'm not working. I work all the time. It's because it's fun. And if you have a job that you like, why would you give it up to then talk to tenants, which you don't like, And that's part of understanding, hey, which part of this whole real estate sphere is actually going to be interesting for me. And I think that's why eventually some people think, you know what, syndications as an LP are a better option for me because I don't even want to manage the manager anymore. I just want to let them do everything. And I understand where the leverage returns are.
Yeah, and if you ask any syndicator over the past 2 or 3 years, they wish they were an LP too.
Especially in Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, just high supply, But I think, that's part of the whole curve. And people who've been through, like you said, you were just getting into it after 08. People who understand what happens after understand it always comes back.
Yeah.
It's just about if you're willing to stay with it, which is why it was cool that you were giving that opportunity to those accidental landlords. Like, well, your net sheet says, you're bringing money to closing, but if you rent it, you're going to be break even for a while and you can just hold on and things will go back up. I mean, that's really the non-panic situation. And a great other option, like you said, I've been licensed for 10 years and I've always found that no matter what I'm doing in real estate, it's important that I have the license because then I could list. I could just buy it direct. You just have more tools in the toolbox when you have that out there and more experience with what the people on the other side of transactions are thinking as well.
Yeah, I remember when I first got my license, this was, I guess, way back when, but I was new and this was back, I haven't even been in a traditional real estate office brokerage in a long time, but they would have these, brokers opens, I think on Tuesdays, was the days that people were going, right? And I remember going in there. It's the only time you see like anybody in the office.
Yeah.
Because that's when they also serve lunch and you go on these brokers opens and they give you food. So people that don't even sell anything, they just go there for the food.
Got to get that Panera. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember going in there. There's this guy. He had some miles on him and he was like sitting in the corner and he's like, "Hey, Mo." I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he was just like, "Hey, you know what the secret to this game is?" And I was like, "What?" "Staying power." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Just stay in the game as long as you can. And at some point it's something's going to happen."
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that goes to your point, right? I think as long as you stay alive. Okay. And you mentioned break even. I tell people sometimes, like, if you got a great property in a great location, it doesn't even matter if you don't even break even at the end of the day. Like look at it as a forced piggy bank. Like you're making deposits in your piggy bank, even if you're not cash flowing. I take a more holistic approach of like, all right, you're not cash flowing this specific thing, but like, if you're looking at your cash flow overall and everything, like, dude, cut down on the Starbucks or with this, or better yet, change your mindset and make more money. So now you are cash flowing. And I think that's more important than anything else. So I don't put too much. I'm a little bit different than maybe some of these other guys where they're like all cash flow. And I get it. It's important.
Yeah.
But it's not like the end all be all for me when it comes to a real estate investment.
Yeah, I love that point. It's especially important now. I mean, nothing's cash flowing really the same as it was with 7% rates, but I think that's a really important overlook on it. The way that I've always looked at it, because I grew up with a dad who was a cash investor, so I was a cash investor. So I didn't have to worry about cash flow, which was lucky for me. But I also learned a lot of lessons about just waiting it out, like you said. And looking at properties, I've always called myself an asset hunter, because if you look at it and you're like, this is a good asset, it's just performing poorly right now. Maybe because I didn't do enough maintenance and now I have some CapEx that I neglected, but this area is starting to go. Like, I bought in this area for a reason. Now it's starting to go. And just like momentum, people quit before they finally get the momentum. They can quit before the property actually finally starts to appreciate because they mess up with other investments or they buy too many doors. Don't you think that's really, I mean, it goes to what you're saying. It's like, if you're looking at it and you're like, no, I really like this asset, I don't want to give it up, and you're not doing it from emotional attachment, there is a way to ride it out. Like you said, even with a net negative, it's still going to come back. It's real estate. It always eventually turns positive.
Yeah, I think, I've never verified this. I'm already trepidatious saying it whenever I don't, but I think they say, look, pick any 10-year run in time. And at any point, whatever that first year was to that 10th year was, that real estate was worth more from 1 to year 10, right? So as long as you give yourself enough runway to do that, then yeah, I mean, real estate 10 years ago was less expensive than it is today, even given everything that's happening today, right?
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy. So yeah, you're right with that. And I think it's just, people, unfortunately, like I said, they hear those horror stories renting out their house from people. My cousin told me they rented their house out once and it got trashed. And then my neighbor told me this and that, right? So you're always going off of somebody else's experience. And I always try to tell people like, well, listen, like, do you go to a surgeon that has never gone through freaking doctor school or medical school and they start performing on your head? Like, do you think they're going to have a high level of success or low? Right. And that's what happens with these people. They just jump into doing this without any experience, without any knowledge, without anything. And then they get shocked when they they fail or things don't work out the way they want it. And so, again, that's a decision you want to make. Are you going to take the time to learn, to, get all the information, or are you just going to hire somebody else that already has it and do it and go that route? And like I said, I'm more of the latter at this point.
Yeah, it goes to what you said at the beginning, like you're running a business. And I think anyone who buys real estate should be thinking of themselves running a business. And what do good businesses do? They hire people to do the jobs that they don't want to do. I mean, that's the principle of growing a business. And like you said, careful scaling works that way too. I don't want to talk to the tenants, so I hire someone who's better at that than me. I think that's really the important thing that we see, where people, like you said, they're just biting off too much, or they're looking online and say, it's crazy to me the way people, a lot of onlines, I'll see somebody go in and they'll just say, I'm looking to get into real estate. I want to buy a bunch of Section 8 rentals. And I have nothing against Section 8 rentals. I think if you're good at it, you can absolutely crush it. But it's like, you're watching TikTok. That's not your ideal first investment. You're just thinking that the government pays you, so it's going to be easy. And it's just short-sighted, because I think people now, unlike when you got started and way long ago when I did, it's just everything's online. It makes it look like it's going to be easy, and then they get a rude awakening.
Yeah, it's half the story, right? Which is what anything in the media or social media is, right? Yes, you get guaranteed rent to an extent, but what is that turnover and make ready looking like when you get that property turned over, right?
Yeah.
I put way more in to get that unit ready than I did collecting money, because they're pretty rough on those historically, like the Section 8 properties, they get beat up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think it just goes back to, what are your goals ultimately? And if it's not to be a landlord, this is my biggest thing with, people call it real estate investing. And I think like that term is just thrown around way too loosely. Like, investing is like your money working for you. And like I said, to me, like, I don't think a wholesaler, a flipper, like, we call it real estate investing, but do their work. That's a job. That's not investing.
Full time and impossible, exactly. And it just goes back to a lot of things we've been saying. It's people don't understand what they're signing up for, and they're working a 9 to 5. Then they get a second 9 to 5 that they didn't want. And then they wonder why it didn't work out, and why, their family's mad because you never told me you were getting a second job. You said you were going to make passive income. I didn't expect it to be $42 and you out the whole weekend. That's not the time freedom we were all hoping for. But they look at it as, well, I want to get to scale. Okay, but as you said, you need money to get to scale. And I think that's a real fallacy in the industry as well, that, hey, you can do anything with no money down. And all of us who've been in the business, the most, I'd say probably at least 80% of the deals that are done creatively or with no money down are with people who have the money to do the deal. It's why they have the leverage to make that type of deal, and they can create the terms and pay them whatever they want. I mean, that's just creative finance in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think, early on, I think you have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of money, right? And as you grow older, just, typical thing, like you get a better job, you start getting paid more. Now you get married, now you have dual income coming in. You're now, as a family, making more money. And so at some point, you got to ask yourself, like, where do I fall in that, right? Am I early on? I just got out of college. I'm like still I'm young. Okay. Do the whole no money down thing, because you have no money, right?
Yeah.
Like, do it.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it. But like, if you're now like, have a family, you've been at your job for a little bit, you're doing pretty well, you got a little bit of discretionary income coming in. Now it's like, hey, like, I don't need to trade my time for money. I need to trade my money for time, ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think so much of social media is just on that first part of like grind till you freaking like don't spend $1 or whatever. And that's a young man's game, man. I'm going to tell you that right now. And, not all of us are young men anymore. So like I said, if I got some money, I'm going to throw it in there, whether it's, some people may not be familiar with how syndications work or anything, but like, if you want all the benefits of being a landlord without the headaches of being a landlord, that's how you can, scale very quickly by just giving 50, 100 grand, whatever you got, they'll accept into a syndication. And now you're a part owner of a bigger multifamily deal or whatever it is that they're buying. And now you should also get a little bit of cash flow. Again, there's not a whole lot out there, just like there isn't on the single family.
Yeah.
But hopefully the equity's building and you're, making some money that way.
Yeah. And like you said, you're creating a piggy bank for yourself that you can't take it out of. Syndications aren't as liquid, but that's the whole point. It's like when you invest in things that you can't take out, that's a syndication. You have to know that going in, and it's almost a hedge against yourself. Well, I really like that speedboat, but instead, why don't I park this and I can get 2 speedboats later, or just reinvest it and get 1 speedboat and a lot of extra money.
Yeah. I always kind of like think of myself as like, am I in between like Dave Ramsey and like Grant Cardone, right? It's like 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. And I'm like I feel like I kind of fall in the middle because like I feel like you kind of need to protect yourself from yourself a little bit when it comes to like debt and all the things that you want to buy. So you can't go too far Grant's side, but also like I'm not playing it so safe like Dave Ramsey where I'm not even like using leverage at all. So yeah, you got to find that thing in the middle, but I feel like you got to protect yourself from yourself a little bit. And hey, having not access to money for a while may actually be a good thing for you, especially if you got some interesting spending habits. Yeah,
I agree. Well, tell us the backstory for Flat Fee Landlord, because I think it's something interesting that you created that other people will want to learn about. And it's kind of all part of your evolution in real estate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said, my early days as a real estate agent and doing listing presentations to sell their home and not being able to led me to start managing homes, right? And, the first thing somebody is like, yeah, okay, you can manage my home. I was like, all right.
What do I do?
Yeah,
how do I get money?
How do I get money? What do I charge, right? Like, it's pretty simple. Back in the day, like real estate, you charge 6%, right?
Yeah.
And property management, even back then, even now, I think to this point, it's gotten a little bit more popular. But back then, like single family long-term management was not really that popular, right? Yeah. And, you had your short-term rentals and you had your vacation rentals, but like leasing out your home for a 12-month lease, like it just wasn't really that popular. So again, went back, did my research, and I noticed a lot of companies were charging a percentage on their home. And, being new, not having any experience, you always want to find a differentiator that's going to set you apart, right? If you got nothing else, find something that's going to make you different.
Yeah.
And so early on, I thought that would be price. And, for me, the whole thought of it was, let's make this fair. Let's make this fair for people that want to use our services. And, in Northern Virginia, just like any major metropolitan area, you got your good areas and you got your bad areas. And the closer you get to your good areas, the rent obviously is going to go up because it's a more desirable area, right? Yeah. Just like the value of the home is going to be. But if I were to pick that home up and just move it out to like the outskirts of that area, maybe like 20 miles outside, it's the same house, probably still part of the same metro area, but now the rent's going to go down just because it's not as close to that city center or, more desirable place. Does that make it any harder for me to manage?
Exactly. Right? Like, your duties are the same, really, even on bedroom count. There's not really, why would the management cost more just because there's more bedrooms? There's more bathrooms, but I mean, that doesn't mean they're going to break.
Exactly. Same house, just somewhere else, right? And honestly, if I'm still in a major metro area, which we are, we only operate in major metro areas, we have access to the same vendors as well. And so to us to manage it, it doesn't matter if you're close, far, wherever. If it's the same house, we know at this point, because of our systems and processes, what it costs us to manage a door that we bring on.
Yeah.
And so that's why we came up with that flat fee concept, is because we don't want to punish you just because your home is in a nice, desirable area. You have to pay a higher management fee because it's based off a percentage of your rent versus that guy that's further out. So we came up with the flat fee concept of this is what it's going to be because this is what it costs us and we're going to be profitable so long as we charge this. And so we started offering that. And like I said, that really differentiated us in the market. Still to this day, I think some other people have started also doing that. But, we're in 7 different markets now. Like I said, we mentioned we're in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and now I'm in Texas. We're in Houston, DFW, Austin, San Antonio. And so, like I said, we like those major metro areas because it gives us options, not only with the tenants, but also with vendors. And that's what you want as a landlord. And on top of that, aside from Maryland and DC, which just kind of happened to be brought in just because I happen to live there, they're all landlord friendly places as well, Virginia and all those areas in Texas, which is something I love. And so, I don't like to go against the current, like DC and Maryland, that's tough. Just like New York and California, right? I will never go into any of those places.
You're talking to a lifelong New York single family investor. But the truth is, when you're thinking about property management, like we lived in New York, so my dad always bought in New York. He was a good landlord. He was a pushover, but he picked the tenants and he understood that some week it wasn't going to come the right way. So it still really all goes back to the tenant because you don't even need the landlord tenant laws if you do correctly. Of course, squatter could come up in any area and it would be easier if it was, landlord friendly, but a lot of it goes down to keeping the property in a good way so tenants are happy with it and just choosing the right person on the way in.
Absolutely. I think where some of these places get in trouble, though, is when they start limiting the qualifications that you can have on qualifying your tenants, right? You got your federal fair housing laws, which I think are great. But then some of these states just really take it to the next level on things that you can or cannot approve people. And that's why as a landlord, you want to really base it off of, is this person going to treat my house well? And are they going to pay me on time? Right.
Yeah.
And if they start protecting some other stuff that has nothing to do with that, then that's not really someplace I want to do business in. And so that's why I like I said, more of the Virginia, Texas stuff, because they don't really mess with that as much as some of these other places.
Yeah, I'm all for tenants' rights, but I find it a little bit unusual for people to say you can't consider a credit score, as if that's not relevant to choosing a renter as a landlord, or criminal history. These are just things I'm going to do as a human who owns a property, but the cool thing about being a landlord is you can give somebody a break. If you see something and they have a story that checks out, you have the opportunity as a landlord to give someone a chance when maybe they're having trouble. Everybody who has pets knows it's hard to rent. So people who take pets, they understand what they're taking on, but you have a lot higher rental pool for people coming in and they'll pay a lot more if you take pets, and you just kind of know what you're in for. Have you seen that on the pet front? I feel like that's I've had calls where they're like, oh, P.S. I have 4 pit bulls. I'm like, that's an insurance issue. First of all, 4 dogs is a lot. You just can't expect, have a bunch of rental opportunities like that.
Yeah, if I'm gonna give some actionable advice to your listeners here, I forget the stat. Somebody said it to me once. I'm gonna butcher it, but 50% of the people that are applying have pets, and then the other 50% have pets, but they're not telling you that, right? So at the end of the day, you're gonna deal with pets, regardless if you allow it or not. It's just up to you whether you want to capitalize and charge more for it if you can, right? And so, as an investor, we always tell our clients, we consider it on a case-by-case basis, right? So in that case, we're not going to accept 4 pit bulls in the property, but we typically like to allow up to 2 non-aggressive breeds in the property up to a certain poundage. Because here's the other thing, you got to realize a pet is another living, breathing thing that's going to be in your house, and it's going to create wear and tear on your house as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so you just got to kind of keep that in mind. And so for us, we do consider that as part of the application. You have to apply with the pet.
Yeah.
And then there is a fee that's going to be associated with it, a monthly fee and an additional fee, one-time fee. And so that's to cover that wear and tear ultimately that comes with it. But now, like you said, you want to keep your net as wide open as possible, because that's the most important thing when renting out a house is that tenant.
Yeah.
You find the right tenant, you're going to have a great experience. And so you do not want to limit it by saying only this amount of people can do it. No, invite as many people as possible to apply. But going back to what you said earlier, don't accept the very first person. Make clear standards of what you are going to accept ahead of time. Again, that's, goes back to the law, and abide by it, and don't lower your standards.
I agree.
Because you're not getting it for some reason, right? It just means maybe something's not being done. You need to fix it.
Yeah, you have to be patient. I've had clients who've, rejected 4 on very rightful grounds. Either the application was terrible, too many people, like complete overload, fire hazard, and then they waited, maybe it took 60 to 70 days, but they got a great tenant and now we don't hear a peep, so it is worth it. And all the horror stories from landlords over the years all come from basically choosing too quickly or over believing a story without verifying. I mean, people are good at technology. We had a renter come with an entire fake visa, a fake job. We had to go to the HR site. I always tell everyone, just like with a wire transfer, don't look at that phone number. Go on the website, call the HR person. They'd never heard of them. So this is what's out there. People are looking to do odd things for whatever reasons. And I think you have to be diligent. And as we've been saying the whole time, that's why it's not a great idea, if you're not really into it, to do it yourself. You could be, you could get snowed really quickly out there in this environment. It's pretty easy to miss something.
Yeah, I would tell your listeners, if you're going to invest in anything when it comes to real estate, and first invest in yourself, right? In your education. I think that goes beyond that. But next is, if you have no experience placing a tenant, hire somebody that has a track record of doing it, because the rest of your life, that's like, it goes the whole 80-20 principle, right? Like, you get that right, dude, the rest of your experience as a landlord, I'm not saying it's 100% that it's going to be good, but you have a much higher chance of it being good than if you don't. And I find a lot of times, kind of like what you just said, people have to put their house on the market. They're on a time crunch. They're like running low on funds. And so now they're like, oh, this person's kind of good. Like, so-and-so referred them to me, this or that, but they don't really meet my standards. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it because I feel good about it, right?
Yeah.
Even though they don't. And if you would have just maybe made a price adjustment or done something else to attract more people, rather than just doing that, even if it took an extra month or 2 months, I don't think people really realize how much damage it does putting the wrong tenant in there.
Oh, yeah.
Missed rent, to going through the eviction, paying for an eviction, paying for repairs.
I mean, rocks in the toilet, fires, mold, things that they don't care about. Like, they can really ruin I've always phrased it like this. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Your renter is the caretaker of your asset. So why wouldn't you do everything to make sure that you pick a good caretaker and also treat them well in the process, make sure they have everything they need, because then they'll treat your property better. I mean, that's really, the long-term effect of not paying attention or paying attention. Like you said, if you're not good at it, hire somebody who has that touch and understands what it means to be in touch, make sure the rent's paid on time, making sure, hey, you're having any problems, because, it's fire and water. You always know the tenant who doesn't tell you about mold for a month isn't doing it because they don't know there's mold. They just know you're not going to do anything about it. So they're going to let you get a few extra months of mold, or so it reaches that threshold of like, hey, we only do repairs over 100. All right, well, we got to let this thing run for a little bit. That's where people go wrong, right? We know these stories, but I think the people out there might not.
Yeah, and I think this is also going back to, if you don't have a property right now and you're like, hey, what should I do? You're gonna, like, your property is gonna attract your tenant, and what I mean by that is, if you have buy a nice suburban home that's in a pretty decent neighborhood, in a well-to-do neighborhood, you're going to likely attract a tenant that's going to fit into that neighborhood. And as somebody that takes care of their life because they have a well-paying job and so forth, they're a little bit more responsible. And ultimately, that's what you want. You want somebody that's responsible in your house because they take responsibility of your house, right? And so if you're out in the hood somewhere and you're also not taking, like you said, if you're not taking care of stuff as well as it needs to happen, if you're not taking care of the property shows it's not being taken care of. Well, now you're attracting tenants that also aren't going to be taking care of it. Yeah. And so does it cost more to be in this neighborhood that requires a little bit more responsible tenant? Yes, but it's an investment. Like, number one rule of real estate, we all know it. It's location, location, location. And so it plays a huge part in the type of tenant you're going to attract too.
Yeah, and I agree. Even for people who invest in D, if you just say, oh, well, I'm in a D neighborhood, so I'm going to do nothing, you're going to get a D tenant. If you really take care of it and you upgrade it, not spending a ton of money, because that wouldn't be smart, but making it kind of the best rental on the market, you'll get the best renter in a D area who that's all they can afford right now. But they're going to be the ones who are going to go get it. And I think if you look at the photos online and they're like, I'm not sure what's happening here, well, you're overpriced and you have, 5 photos, the carpet's clearly through. Oh, I'll change it when we get a renter. Yeah, that's what everybody likes to hear. You're not even paint and carpet ready for the new renter. That's just cheap and waiting for the turnover. I got to get those deposits, then I'll do the thing. That's just silly behavior. Mo, this has been awesome. Is the best place for people to find you guys online at Flat Fee Landlord and HoustonPropertyManager.com?
Yeah, that flatfeelandlord.com goes to all of our places. So that works.
Yeah, awesome. And they can also find you on LinkedIn and obviously various social media Flat Fee Landlords out there.
Yeah, and my personal Instagram is at Mo Hashem. And look forward to connecting with people on all platforms.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it. It's been a great episode. I grew up managing properties for my dad unwillingly and learned a lot, but I think you brought up a lot of great points. And I do think these are really important points for people to look at. Is this going to be the right fit for me? And if so, do I want management or can I do it myself? How do I want to learn? So look forward to staying in touch with you, and thanks for spending the time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Enjoyed being here.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Mo Hashem. He's the visionary behind Flat Fee Landlord. Again, you can find them at flatfeelandlord.com. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. For episode 226, my guest is Melissa Nash. She started Lady Luck Investments out of necessity. She believes when women have money, good things happen. She will teach you the secrets of smart real estate investing and how to take control of your financial future. This is a story about somebody who figured it all out on their own in less than 6 years. Can't wait for you to hear it next episode with Melissa.